Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedict, and I'm feeling relaxed.
I'm Benedicta. Today is April 19th. This is episode number 136, and I'm feeling confident. And with us today is Anna Maste. Anna Maste and her mother bootstrapped a two-sided marketplace called Boondockers Welcome over a period of 10 years. After selling it a year ago for a life-changing amount, she is at it again with Subscribe Sense. Welcome, Anna, and how are you feeling this week?
Thank you. I am feeling frustrated. I feel guilty saying that after that amazing intro, but it's true.
It's true. I mean, you feel what you feel. Any particular reason?
Well, your typical debugging software, just struggling with bugs that are hard to track down, and the software that I'm building this time around is much more dependent on like third-party integrations, and it's a lot harder, I'm finding, to deal with third-party code than code that is all your own. There's all of these intricacies and things that just go wrong that you're not expecting.
So tell us about your new venture. What problem does it solve?
Yeah, so SubscribeSense is a SaaS that you drop into your marketing stack that tries to help you reduce the number of people who don't confirm their email address for your mailing list. So my previous company, we had a pretty substantial mailing list that, drove a lot of sales. And something that I noticed sort of far too late to actually do anything about it. It was really only when we were getting ready to sell, I noticed that the number of subscribers who actually confirmed their email address was in like the 60% range. And, I could look and see that most of those signups were legit signups and people who just never managed to hit that last step. There was just too much friction. So I'm trying to provide a tool that helps people make sure that they're capitalizing on all of those leads who are actually interested in getting their email newsletters.
That's an interesting topic.
You might know that Benedict runs a email service.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear your take on that for sure.
I'm not entirely sure I have a take, because while we have like double opt-in feature behind a feature flag, like it's not officially part of the product yet. So I still have a lot of open questions around all of it at all times. And even our current implementation is, I'm not entirely sure if it's working correctly. Like, well, it's working, but like one thing we have an ongoing debate about is just like basically what you just described. Like, should we even surface that data? Like when someone submits a form and has double opt-in enabled, should we even tell you about them until they click the confirm link or not? So do you have an opinion on that? I mean, sounds like you kind of want to know.
I mean, the email provider that we had been using with my previous company didn't really surface that information in any obvious way. It wasn't on a dashboard. It was, they did, however, keep track of, every email that went out, including that initial opt-in email. So at some point, I just downloaded all of the transactional emails that had been sent out, including that email, and was able to sort of do the math about how many people had gotten the email versus how many had actually confirmed. And that's when I really noticed that difference. And yeah, like, I don't know. Did I feel like I felt gypped because they hadn't shared that information with me? Maybe a little bit. I mean, would I have changed my approach? Would I have said, forget this double opt-in, it's not worth it? Maybe. And I know the people we sold to don't have a double opt-in, and I'm sure that their list has, substantially larger growth because of it. So, I mean, it's nice to have all the information and make the decisions based on the information. That said, I know that the few email providers that do make that information available, I'm pretty sure they get nagged all the time by their users about, why did these people not subscribe or not confirm? Is there any way that I can send them a reminder? And for a lot of them, that's just not their it's not in their interest to necessarily diagnose those issues or deal with it. And I was chatting with Rob Walling about it at MicroConf last week, because he, of course, also used to run a marketing email service. And, he said that I think they did send out a reminder. They defaulted to a double opt-in, and they did send out a reminder, or they thought about it, but then they were worried about sort of how the deliverability of that might affect them, because obviously if people didn't respond to the first one, pretty good odds they're not going to respond to the second one. And so that was sort of a big debate for them. So it's also an issue that I'm, trying to keep in mind as I deal with that. But I'm hoping that, sending out a reminder email is sort of the last tier of interventions that my product would use.
Oh, this is, because
What I find,
it's just because I've seen a lot of, especially even with kind of tech people signing up, they often forget to hit the subscribe button. But I would imagine for like a less technically inclined audience, like it would be even easier for them to kind of not see that opt-in email and confirm. I don't know where I was going with that. I had a thought. I lost my thought.
I mean, it depends how cluttered your inbox is. And then,
Yes.
some people have, their SPF and DKIM records aren't set up properly. And so that email doesn't actually make it to the inbox. It's buried in spam somewhere. And, if you're the people who are sending out these marketing emails, if they're not necessarily technically inclined enough to have all of those ducks in a row, then their lists are going to suffer because of that. And so that's one of the interventions that I am introducing, is just what I didn't coin this term, but what somebody coined a term of a sniper link, which is essentially on your confirmation page, it says, please go confirm. And then there's actually a link directly into your inbox, depending on who your mail provider is, that has the search parameter for the email you're looking for in the URL. So that, if you're a Gmail user, it will send you to your Gmail and pull up the email exactly that's coming from benedict@userlist.com, right? So that's sort of one of the ways to help cut through the noise and get that email surfaced more easily.
Oh, that is super quite clever, even though it's called sniper link.
There's only a few people who have used that term, but I'm going to take it because it sounds like a cool term. So no use reinventing the wheel.
I've also seen inside of the Blogging for Devs community, a lot of people redesigning their the page that you get to after submitting your email to be like super clear that this is just step one out of potentially several steps. And some of them have had, and that is like, most of the people reading developer blogs are developers, so they should know this. But it turns out that changing the design and making it super clear, like head over to your inbox right now and find it, and search through spam, and like being very very clear in the design, has helped a lot of them increase their confirmation numbers. So yeah.
And telling them what to look for when they get there, right? Like just saying, go to your inbox isn't as useful as saying, go to your inbox and look for an email with this subject line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it depends on, again, what email provider you're using. Some of them, if you just leave it as the default is just thanks for subscribing, and nobody even thinks to, actually think twice about that and think maybe that's not the most useful thing for a double opt-in list.
It's like, should be like alert emoji, alert emoji, alert emoji, confirm, alert emoji, alert emoji.
Yeah, so there are definitely lots of things people can do without paying me to help solve the problem. But I'm trying to come up with a sort of more technical and repeatable solution that works across lots of different email providers and is sort of dependable, regardless of where people are coming from and what device they're on and things like that.
So you said that you had been debugging. Is it you? Are you more people?
It's just me right now. my last company was just really me and for the first half, my mom, who was my co-founder, and then more than half. And then for the last couple of years, she kind of stepped back and I hired someone who took over a lot of the customer support pieces. But I really enjoy the small team and I enjoy both sides. I enjoy doing dev as well as sort of the more businessy CEO aspect. Marketing, well, I mean, I enjoy marketing as much as every dev it does, which is to say, not that much, but I'm learning.
You do it though. You actually do it, which is like I guess the biggest
That's
I do
difference.
now.
the most important step, right? Actually starting.
I do now. I certainly, when Boondockers Welcome launched the first, oh gosh, probably 5 years, we, pretty much surfed on the initial launch. We had a really good. My mom, who was my co-founder, had an email list from a previous. She published these guides. So the Boondockers Welcome is for RVers, like camper van caravanners, and she had self-published some travel guides for RVers, and she had like this great list. So we were able to use that list to sort of seed our initial membership, and we were able to ride the coattails of that for a really long time and not do any marketing. And then at some point, I started paying more attention to the business, and my kids started school, and I had more time, and I actually had been listening to lots of like startups for the rest of us and knew all the things that I was supposed to be doing and hadn't been doing any of them. So once I started doing all those things, I was like, oh, this is how you grow a business. Okay. so yeah, I'm trying not to wait 5 years this time.
So one thing I'm wondering about, and I'm seeing this more often recently, is people like you building tools for existing email providers and like multiple email providers at once that like are all lacking a certain feature. And just like in your case, like a good double opt-in experience. But like, for example, I know Shai Schechter is working on like a front end for managing your subscriptions, and Brennan Dunn is working on a visual email builder that works with all of the email tools. And it feels like that ecosystem is like now becoming are they all becoming platforms that other tools are building up on? And like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? Is it like all email providers are just bad at certain things, or
I guess
like,
they
what's
all
going
just
on?
they all get into their zone of genius, which is just really trying to be about deliverability, and then everything else are like, whatever, we've got your money now. I mean, it's so easy to get, I think, tied into a provider like that. Like, it's not impossible to move your list somewhere else, but it's enough friction that the lack of a couple of features isn't usually enough to make you want to do that. And I think, if you're able to replace that feature for an extra 10 or 20 bucks a month without having to, migrate everything over, a lot of people are just willing to take that hit.
And are you worried about like the email providers picking up on your ideas and just like
Yeah, that's why I'm worried. I'm talking
product?
to you right now, Benedict. I don't want you to like steal my idea. Yeah, for sure. There's obviously, risks with building on anybody's platform. And I'm still essentially pre-launch. I have like one beta customer who's testing out my SaaS right now. So I'm still really early. And I only have one integration right now, and I'm already sort of banging my head against a wall in some ways. So I know there's going to be a lot of risks with that. But the fact that, like you said, it sort of does apply broadly to a lot of different email providers, I feel like that mitigates that risk a lot. So it's like, even if one of them, either cuts off my API access or replicates that functionality themselves, that, unless they all do, I've, at least got some kind of product that's worth selling.
After the email provider summit of 2023, where they all vote I'm sure there is such a summit. But being both the developer and marketer, like, how do you deal with that, and what does a typical week look like for you?
I wish I could say I had, a great schedule and Monday was marketing day and the rest was development day. But realistically, I mean, I also am the parent to two school-aged kids, and um, my husband usually is sort of more full-time and pre-COVID traveled a lot, so my schedule often ends up getting thrown upside down because family life gets in the way. So I am not necessarily the most organized person. It's more just, when opportunities present themselves, when, somebody on Twitter is having a conversation about something that I think, I can contribute to, or work my product into the conversation, then I'll hop on that. But there's not really a whole lot of dedicated marketing time at this point anyway.
But coding wise, though, is it, do you have a very clear list of what you're going to do so that when you have that time, having having family that will kind of interfere, because I don't know what to say, will interfere with your working time. But when you don't have that time alone and you can focus, do you have kind of a system so that you can get faster into focus, or does that just come naturally to you?
Or not at all. I mean, I do try to, prioritize what needs to be focused on. And, right now I'm in very early stages where, I'm sort of very much still looking at what my, first customer is encountering and what sort of issues with the integration um, I'm seeing, and sort of trying to fight all those fires. So there's a lot less like, here's my list of features I want to bang out this week. And it's more like, okay, what is wrong here? And what is wrong here? And why isn't this working? So it's, it's a little less organized than I would like. I mean, I can go back to like when I was working on Boondockers Welcome, I sort of, after my kids started school full time, I had like a full, I rewrote the entire tech stack and launched that took me probably a year of sort of working. I wouldn't say 9 to 5. It was more like 9:30 to 2:30 every day while they were at school. But yeah, I did that for about a year and had a really good list of all the features that I needed to implement and all the support to migrate all of our customers from the old system to the new system. And, I managed to knock all those things out in a pretty organized manner. And I hope to get to the point where I'm doing that again. Unfortunately, the beginning is kind of messy, where you're trying to figure out what's important. And in like the MVP stage, there's so many features that I feel like, oh, this would be cool, and this would be cool, and this would be cool. But I really am trying to focus on, getting out the most important features and then taking a step back and assessing and seeing, okay, are these doing what I want them to do? Is the customer getting the value from it? And I want to onboard a few more people and keep doing that and iterating and talking to them, and then sort of deciding where I need to go from there.
Do you feel like, because sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just said I love it.
Okay.
An honest
you have
answer.
a follow-up question?
No, I don't. Go ahead, Benedict.
Okay. So I was wondering, like, as this is like your second time around, basically, do you feel like the pressure is higher, or the expectations are higher, or is it just like
yes and
from
no
scratch and feeling like, yeah, we can? I just try a different thing, and this has nothing to do with the previous one, and like there's no pressure, and I can try over and over again? Or do you feel like the first one was successful in a way, like depending on? I mean, obviously it was a success, but do you feel like the second time it has to go the same route, or like,
I mean, it would sure be nice. I think like during my first startup, I wasn't really a part of the startup community. I wasn't on Twitter. I wasn't, on Indie Hackers. I wasn't, really going to MicroConf until sort of the very end. And so, I mean, any pressure to do well was fully, internal pressure from me. And, for the first 5 or 6 years of running the company, it was really just like something I did on the side while I was being a full-time parent. And then it wasn't until, it became sort of enough, had enough revenue that I was like, oh, this is actually a real company and I should really actually focus on this. But now that I've, been successful and, talked about it on a bunch of podcasts and talked about it on Twitter, and now it's like, oh, there are people who are actually watching me and like, that I don't know that maybe they are not putting the pressure on me, but that makes me put even more pressure on myself to not be like the disappointment, the one-hit wonder, right?
But do you feel, because we saw that, I guess you saw that talk too with the Dr. Sherry Walling on MicroConf on kind of the messiness of exiting and how a lot of founder look at it as, a large part of their identity, and after exiting kind of needs to have another project like that for their identity or to just fill their time, or so, like why are you starting another one? Why not just step
Yeah.
back, relax, enjoy?
I think, yeah, there is a lot of what Dr. Walling said that rings true in that, where my identity wasn't necessarily tied up with that company that I sold, which was good because it made parting with it, actually not an emotional roller coaster. But, at some point you realize or for me, my identity is kind of tied up now with this building and founder ecosystem, and I'm really enjoying it. Like, this was, I was always, a technically inclined, good at math and science kind of, kid, teenager, whatever, but I was never necessarily like the 10x developer. But I was also, a people person, and I was good at communication, and I was good at sort of all of these other things. And so I've really found entrepreneurship is just a fantastic way to take all of those different pieces and put them into action, right? It's like I'm not enough good enough developer to be a 10x developer and to be like the best individual contributor at my company. And I hate, being a people manager, and that's not something I ever wanted to do. And like, when they made me do it at work, I was like, this is garbage. I don't want to do this anymore. But I am okay at like managing a few people, doing something that I care about, and like directing a product that, I care about, and doing some development in areas that I care about. And, it doesn't have to be perfect, and that's fine. And it's my product on the line. If the development isn't awesome, then that's my cross to bear. So honestly, and getting back to your question, do I feel like my personality is wrapped up in being a founder? Kind of. On the other hand, like, what the heck else am I going to do? I still have 2 kids who are like, the oldest one is 12. Like, they're not going to, move out and go to college for at least another like 6 or 8 years. And, the idea of being retired and sitting at home while they're at school all day just sounds really boring. And so, if I was going to be retired, I'd love to travel, and I can't really do that right now. Plus it's COVID and all these other things. And so it just seemed natural to just do what I've learned how to do and see if I can do it even better next time.
Great. So very relatable. And also I saw you tweeted like, what's up with an extra Monday of vacation of school being closed? I had that exact feeling on that exact day, sitting in the mountains. I'm like, I've been traveling so much. The listeners know, and we met at MicroConf, and then finally on that last day of vacation, I just want to get home and do some coding. I did a little bit of recreational coding on vacation, but like, I was like, I want to get back to it. Like, it's fun. Like, that's why we do
I
it.
love my kids, but we've spent so much time together over the last 2 years. Like, every day that I can get them out of the house is a good day.
Absolutely. So we were also very happy that school was back on today. That was got a lot of done. It feels like days since I was in the mountains yesterday. Wow. Weird. Anyway, we're not talking about me. How long Well, we can. How long did it take from kind of the exit wrapping up and things being done until you got that itch that like I need to do a new thing?
Like not at all. The two totally overlapped. We closed the deal in May of last year, and our acquirers. I worked essentially on contract for them for 6 months to sort of transition everything over, and so it wasn't full-time hours that I was working for them. So it was pretty much, when I wasn't working for them, I was starting to think about what the next opportunity was going to be for me, and sort of starting to brainstorm about problems that I had struggled with Boondockers Welcome. And I actually did the thing where you talk to people this time and ask them about, I read Michelle Hansen's book about deploy empathy, about, talking to your customers, and interviewed people and had a couple of ideas, and sort of this is the one that seemed to resonate most with the people I talked to. So.
What have you learned with Boondockers Welcome that you're gonna continue doing with this new product, and what are some things you will not be doing this time around?
So I've definitely learned, the value of, a bunch of different marketing channels that worked really well for us there. And, they won't necessarily all translate because that was a sort of B2C product versus a B2B product. But we had a lot of success with sort of affiliate marketing. And I think there is some space for that. And sort of there's a lot of like bloggers writing for other bloggers or newsletter, email marketing type people, and some affiliate marketing channels could really, I think, work in that regard. So that's something that I would like to eventually explore. Obviously, just having some good content marketing SEO is something that I plan to focus on. I haven't gotten there yet. And I know that's probably something I should be starting sooner than later because it takes a long time for SEO to build up. And I know that, and I'm still not doing it. But it's on my list. But I mean, there's lots of things I won't be doing, mostly starting a B2C marketplace with Bootstrap, because that's just an insane thing that only somebody who has never really paid any attention to anybody's advice would do. And that's the only reason I did it, is because I didn't know any better.
But it worked.
But obviously it worked out, so maybe everyone else is wrong.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've talked to a few people sort of since who are like, oh, wow, you did this thing that I'm trying to do where you're building a B2C marketplace. And all I want to do is say, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Just because I was successful doesn't mean you'll be successful. I mean, we were lucky. Like I said, we had an unfair advantage with that sort of initial list of people who really seeded the marketplace. And we had a lot of sort of fans from that prior to even launching. My mom had built a really strong sort of fan base already. She had actually been profiled in the New York Times for like her guides on, RVing on the cheap in the United States. So that was really like, an unfair advantage that unless you have that going in, I would never recommend doing what we did.
But now I have a side. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Benedict.
Do you feel like it was also related to, and I have no idea about the details of Boondockers Welcome, but at least from the outside, it sounds to me that everyone who's participating is basically a host, and also most likely someone who's then visiting other hosts, and that was see both sides at the same time.
Yeah, that is absolutely 100% true. And that's, a lot of people who are thinking about two-sided marketplaces. That is, I think, even the bigger struggle, is that you've essentially got two disparate groups and you're trying to deal with both of them at the same time. And yeah, we had essentially one group. It was like, you could be a host, you could be a guest, you could be both. And at the beginning, most people were both. And so it was a lot easier to start off. So if you can, have a two-sided marketplace where it's not really two sides, it's like two sides of the same coin, then that's maybe an advantage to that, but it's still an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. So it's my side question here. Like, how did your mom get started with the the digital guides for RVs. I mean, like, that's the gateway drug, right? Everybody
it's
says
true.
like an info
It's info
product,
product.
and she did it. And I'm guessing she didn't kind of read about that in like or listen to Startup Brother. It probably wasn't even started.
It's interesting. I feel like she should get on one of these podcasts, and she's
She
not.
should.
She doesn't like. She doesn't
Definitely.
like doing that at all. So she won't do it. But I honestly, I was totally not a part of that at all. Like, despite the fact that I have the computer engineering background, and she didn't. I think, I don't know, maybe she had a friend who had like a website and was selling an info product, and it was like this site build it software that was supposed to do a lot of the SEO work for you, and so it was sort of this full package that she used to launch that. And I mean, she is a very good writer and very organized, more organized than me. And so she did write like these amazing guides that were very, well organized, and the quality of the info product that she put out was fantastic. But yeah, I think she just sort of learned as she went, and she saw somebody else doing it and had a little bit of a brain to pick for that, and just went for it. And she started RVing in 2000. So I was like just finishing university, I guess, at that point. And so she gave me all my stuff that was still at the house and was like, okay, I'm putting everything else I own in storage and hitting the road for a year. So but she did that, she would have traveled for that full year. And then sort of her and my stepdad they would come home for like 6 months and then go out and hit the road again for another 6 months. And they did that back and forth for a while. And they did it like they were so frugal is the more generous word rather than cheap. They were so frugal when they did that they could actually live for less on the road than they did at home, because they weren't paying rent. They, would stay in free land, like in public forests, and sort of all in America, there's like all of this land that you can camp in for free, essentially. So they did that so affordably. And then she's like, everybody should be doing this. And so she started these guides. And yeah, I think it was all SEO that managed to drive traffic to her. And she had been doing that for she probably had the guides for like 5 years or 6 years before she came to me with the idea for Boondockers Welcome.
I love that part of the story, that your mom is just like, I'm hitting the road. And then like talking to somebody, it's like, I can totally make a website and sell downloadable goods, which, was pre-Stripe, which we always end up talking about this on this show.
Oh, I know.
It's like, and then she came to you with that idea, and you're like, yeah, but then, okay, I'll help my mom. And then it took some years.
The story was that she came to me and said, I want to start this, like couch surfing, but for RVers platform. And she was looking for my advice on like where she could hire someone to write the website for her. And I was kind of like, oh, that's going to cost a lot of money. And why don't you, I was on maternity leave at the time, and we get 12 months of maternity leave here in Canada. So I was like, why don't you just come hang out with your grandson, and I'll like plug away at this and see if I can build something for us. And so it took me like 2 maternity leaves. It was, definitely the world's slowest MVP, but we did eventually launch it, and eventually it, grew up with my kids to be something pretty special. So it was cool. And now my mom is actually retired. Retired.
She retired,
Nice.
And then she retired again.
That's right.
Because you said, I think I noted that you actually have a degree in code, like that has to do with coding.
Yeah, I have a computer engineering degree. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know now if I would necessarily say, it's worth your effort to go get a computer engineering degree, or if you can just pretty much learn everything you need to learn on the internet. Like, I have a degree, like I learned how to write code in like C and C++. So, a lot of those skills are translatable, but it's not web development. Like, everything that I do now is stuff that I pretty much learned on the internet, right? Like, it's and my 12-year-old probably knows, as much now as I did when I was graduating. just like about how to code, right? Like he's like building Unity video games and stuff, and it's like you can learn everything online these days.
But it's nice. We usually interview people and talk about that, and we've had a lot of self-taught developers on, and I'm kind of always amazed that they've managed to get to that level. But also, like with your mom, I've seen that they kind of go at it a little bit of a different way. While, as you mentioned, it took you quite a while to build that MVP. Probably, I'm guessing, because you might have over-engineered it a little bit in the beginning.
Yes and no. I built it just on top of like Drupal CMS. So it was like I wasn't even, writing a whole lot of code from scratch. It was a lot of gluing together different modules to do stuff that I wanted it to do, and some custom PHP code. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about web dev, and that was sort of the easiest way into it for me. And then I rewrote the entire thing in Django about 5 years later. And then, I had a lot more flexibility to actually get it to do exactly what I wanted it to do. But yeah, that first MVP was, it wasn't over-engineered necessarily so much as it was, me using a tool that wasn't probably the right tool, but was the easiest thing for me to figure out how to do. And it just took a lot longer. And, I was only working, 5 or 6 hours a week, really, because I had, little people, and, my mom would come over, but it was only once a week or so. And then I went back to my real job at some point, and it just, and it wasn't high priority. Like my mom wanted to do this and I wanted to do it, but it was definitely not, the number one thing in my life for those 2 years.
But what got you going back to it again and again? Like you said, you had a real job. You were doing it kind of on the side for your mom. So kind of what do you think made you actually like finish over that period of time?
Probably just the fact that I told my mom I would do it, and I was like, I'm gonna feel bad if I don't actually finish this. So, it turned out just fine in that, she managed to build her list, considerably more during that time that it took me to build it, so that when we launched, we really did have enough of a splash to sort of carry us for a while. And it was 2012 when we launched, and like RVing was popular, but like people didn't necessarily have like their laptops on the road with like those little mobile hotspots as frequently any earlier than that. And that was kind of imperative to being able to use the platform, was to be able to have, really reliable internet on the road. And like I didn't get my first smartphone until like 2010, and we didn't have a mobile app until quite a long time later. So it was kind of necessary for the world, for the technology to really get to the point where it was viable. So it worked out okay, I think.
Yeah, I'm just asking because like I'm trying to get all this like slow and steady. This is like my thing. Joining this
slow
show.
And steady is definitely the right.
Join this show in like trying to like infuse myself with the slow and steady mentality and like sticking with things. So, it's not trying to like critique it. I'm trying to understand how I also can stick with things over.
Having an external person who you feel sort of responsible to definitely helps in that respect. And that's what I'm using you guys and Twitter for this time around. It's like, okay, if I say on Twitter that I'm going to do this, then I should probably do it.
I'm the same way.
Yep, that helps. I mean, it's in a way, this is what the podcast is for us, right? Like showing up every week and then feeling guilty about not having made any progress since last week.
Super embarrassed to be like, oh, I said I was going to do that in December, but yeah, it's still.
Like at some point, like when some things take too long to finish, then at some point it becomes embarrassing to talk about it on the podcast. So you'd rather finish it. Mention again that you still haven't finished it. By the way, one thought, one question came up when you were talking about like having the technology like adapt to the like being an enabler for the platform. Did the pandemic help with that as well? Did like
Yeah.
I imagine RVing became super popular, and
Yeah,
that probably was noticeable in the numbers.
it was definitely noticeable, and it was a huge part of, the growth that we saw sort of in the year leading up to when we did sell. And I had a lot to do with sort of the valuation that we were able to get when we sold, and was part of the reason that, I mean, we could have maybe continued to see that growth, and it looks like right now RVing is still pretty popular, and that could have kept going. But at the same time, you're kind of like, well, maybe we shouldn't ride this over the top, and maybe we'll just cash out now while everything's doing well. And at some point, everybody's going to be sick of RVing and want to like go on a cruise again. And I don't know, maybe we're getting to that point already, but we definitely benefited a lot from that. So I feel guilty in being a person who benefited from COVID. Although I think there's a lot of remote work, SaaS tools and stuff, like lots of people did. So I'm certainly not the only one in that boat.
And sometimes like it's okay to just be lucky and just be there at the right time. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like a lot of the like big successes that we hear about is just like people being on it and working on it, and then just like being there at the right moment in time when it suddenly becomes more important than everyone was able to anticipate. So
and that's exactly. Yeah, thank you. I will not feel guilty. I mean, that's exactly what happened to us, right? I mean, I tell the story about we did like this little mini accelerator here in town that was like focused on female founders, but it was mostly sort of geared towards getting your slide deck ready to pitch investors, which was not really something that we were interested in. But, as part of that, you like did this speed dating thing with investors where you would like talk to a bunch of different ones and tell them your startup, and like nobody was even remotely interested in investing in our, platform. And this was back in like, I don't know, 2016, 2017. But then when the pandemic hit, it's like RVing really took off, and like a bunch of other businesses that, the investors previously maybe would have been focused on suddenly weren't profitable anymore, or weren't, growing. And so all of a sudden we had all this inbound interest from people who were like, oh, we'd like to talk to you about maybe investing. I was like, oh, how interesting, how the tables have turned.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit more about the process of how the sale came about?
Yeah, so there's lots of companies in the RV space, but in particular, our space is what I would call alternative camping. And there was another company in that same space called Harvest Hosts. And whereas we sort of arranged stays with other RVers on their property, Harvest Hosts had essentially a list of wineries, farms, breweries that would let you park at their businesses for free overnight. And it worked on an annual membership system, which is the same business model that we used. And a lot of our customers were also their customers. There was a lot of overlap. People would have memberships in both programs. And we had been friendly with the owners of that company for quite a few years, and they actually, they got acquired. It was an older couple originally who started it. They got acquired by a young tech guy who loved RVing and had exited from a previous company, and, really loved the concept and wanted to build that company up. And so, I continued sort of a relationship with him once he took over. And I guess early last year, they took a bunch of funding. They announced that they had taken $37 million in funding. And he had reached out to me, at the beginning of the year and said, for all interested in selling, just let me know. And at that point, I wasn't necessarily ready or interested, but he was insistent. And at some point, we just kind of said, well, let's see, if we can get this amount of money that seems kind of ridiculous and life-changing, then I think we would be ready to to move on and see what's next in our lives. And that's pretty much what happened. So, and it felt like it was the best possible acquirer for us, because so many of our customers were already familiar with them. We knew that they really understood sort of what the community, like, because our hosts didn't take money, that it was really about a community aspect. Our hosts were RVers themselves, who usually really are only hosting because they enjoy the social aspect of, meeting all these people. Often they have stopped RVing because they've gotten older, but they still really enjoy that RV community. And so it was really important to us that our acquirers sort of understand that mentality and keep that intact. And Harvest Hosts was prepared to do that, and knew that was that was important to the product, that it wouldn't really function without that. So it was the best possible acquirer for us, and at a time when they had taken a bunch of money, and seemed like it was pretty obvious that we could maybe have a chunk of that.
What is that called? Because I just learned heard people talk about this at MicroConf, because there's that's a strategic buy, or like a strategic acquirer.
Yeah. I mean, we had done gotten valuations done by like some of the brokers that, will do like a valuation based on your P&L statements and say, based on your growth and your revenue, then, we think you could probably sell for this value, right? And because it was definitely a strategic acquisition, we managed to get quite a bit more than that sort of baseline valuation.
I think we're coming to a close, but since we are all developers, and you mentioned that you did the last MVP in a framework you weren't that familiar with, and then you rewrote it. So, what's the current stack?
I played around with like a bunch of different things, thinking, oh, I'm going to try something else this time. I went and I have a Next.js portfolio site that I was playing around with. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this in Jamstack. That'll be so cool. And then I was like, oh, you know what, though? If I actually want to actually get anything done, I should probably just use something I know. So I am just using Django with some vanilla JavaScript. I have a little bit of React in there too, but it's mostly just Django Python on the back end and a little bit of JavaScript on the front. And until it's broke, I ain't gonna fix it.
I mean, that's the message to all your kids out there. Use the tech if you actually want to build a business.
There's so many other hard things to do that technology choice shouldn't be the one thing you struggle with.
Exactly.
Anything you want to tell our listeners about before we leave that we forgot to ask you about?
Oh, well, if you're interested in learning more about SubscribeSense, you can sign up for our beta waitlist at subscribesense.com. And if you want to follow my journey, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Schoolgirl, where school is spelled Skule, which we call the metric spelling.
The metric, because we forgot to ask. You're in Canada. I think you mentioned that. Yeah, and also I am hoping for more music videos coming on Anna's Twitter. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, there will be a link in the description to the magnificent Mariah Carey cover with the new title. What did you title it? I remember some of the chorus, but.
It's All I Want's a Higher ARPU, to the tune of All I Want for Christmas Is You. This is So that's what I did between my acquisition and launching my new company. Was I made a silly music video because that's just something I enjoy.
And it's magnificent. And the link will be in the description, because I met people at MicroConf who had not seen it, which is a sin. So.
Thank you. If I'm remembered for anything, that's what I want to be remembered for. It's my Mariah Carey parody.
I mean, making people laugh and having true, good, fun interactions online, that is absolutely something, spreading cheer is worth is worth it, worth doing online these days.
I agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
So check out those links in the description, and maybe we'll check in with Anna in a month or 6 months or a year and see where she's at with subscriptions. I guess that's it.
Sounds good. Well,
Yeah.
talk to you next week.
See you around the interwebs.
Bye.